What is the biggest what the duck moment you have ever witnessed? This is probably pretty mild, but very perplexing nonetheless. Guy in front of me at Harbor Freight was returning a tape measure. Says it doesn't work. Cashier pulls it in and out. Seems to work great. Numbers are all visible. It extends. It retracts. Seems good. He says, what's wrong with it, sir? It just doesn't work. He says. Cashier goes ahead and does the return. And the customer is now paying for his other items. And says, you know what, I'll buy the tape measure back. Cashier is confused and asks if he would like to go get a new one. He says no. That one's fine. Cashier says, are you sure? He says yeah. Cashier says, I can go grab a new one for you. Customer insists that one was fine. Why I? For context, a guy escaped police custody 3 times after he shot his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend or something. On the run for almost 8 hours before they cornered him in his home. They tried everything from rushing his house to eventually calling the Special Operations Division backwoods SWAT team in. Okay, we are going to ram his door with an armored jeep. They got it stuck on the stairs to his building. And the wrecker had to get called out to pull it out. The second WTF came when he escaped them a 4th time and got busted 2 blocks away by an officer leaving for lunch. Edit, if I can find the video I'll link it. Watched a driver back up into our loading dock without properly securing the trailer doors to the side of the truck. He couldn't hear me, so that wildly swinging door got torn off the hinges when it made contact with the building. As an extra icing on the cake, he also rolled over that door and started shitting bricks about getting fired. Those things are heavy. It took 3 of us to hoist that bad boy back into the trailer. Never saw the driver again. This was in the middle of winter in Canada. My GF and I had just come out of a movie and were waiting for the bus home. My GF was facing me and talking. There was a grocery store behind and to her right and a major 4-lane street to her left, my right. To anyone who knows downtown Vancouver, we were near Burrard. All of a sudden, this total crackhead runs out from the grocery store, pulls off his shirt and books it right down the street while flailing his arms above him. My GF was like, you're not even listening to me. I pointed to the dude and was like, are you seeing this shit? Not 2 seconds after that, this little old lady comes wobbling out of the store waving a stick. I guess chasing the dude. I still have no idea why she would have a stick on her or where she would have gotten it. Stops as she sees the dude's shirt on the ground and just starts poking the shirt with the stick. Almost like she thought the guy melted or something. She then just grunted something and went back in the store. It was like watching something out of Looney Tunes. In high school, this lass fancied another lass and had been building up the courage to ask her out. The day finally came when she did. She asked her and she was immediately shot down. So, she pulled a knife and demanded her to go out with her. I remember standing there, mouth open and literally screaming, what the duck in my head. Seeing the warehouse foreman drop dead of a heart attack and then having to perform CPR on the guy until paramedics arrived. Miss you, Jim. Hope you're still hiking the Appalachians. Saw a woman at a restaurant take the gum she was chewing out of her mouth and literally just ducking, stuck it on the waitress sleeve while she was taking her order. The waitress was in disbelief for a solid 10 seconds as to what just happened. Yes, this was at an Olive Garden. How'd you know? Saw a guy eating roadkill on the side of the highway one night. Full on chomping like it was corn on the cob. Cops were called and they picked him up. Edit, the cops weren't called because we thought we were doing something illegal. They were called cause he was on the highway, no car, and about 6 miles from the nearest exit, and almost in the lane. It was out of concern for his safety as to why the cops took him. I don't think they arrested him as they did not put him in cuffs. I guarantee they brought him to the hospital for a well check. Roommates arguing upstairs, as usual. I'm in the basement getting ready for class. Things get quiet for about 10 minutes. Then the doorbell rings. Nobody answers. And it rings again over and over. I answer the door. And 3 police officers are pointing their guns at me screaming, are you? With one of my roommates' name in the placeholder. Turns out things got heated between the roommates, and one called the cops on the other. First time I've had a gun pointed at me, and hopefully the last. Old to me bicycles being ridden on the shoulder of the interstate. I was in the most desolate part of Wyoming on I-80. It was a drought year, and everything was yellow. Every rock, every dried plant, the dust in the windy sky, just ducking tan and yellow. I just get out of a stretch of 10 plus miles of single lane construction. No exits anywhere, and I'm speeding up because there are now 2 lanes and access to the shoulder again. And I look over, and these 2 guys are on the shoulder, riding old times bicycles with a single massive front wheel and a tiny back wheel. They are higher up in the air than my hatchback sits, like 6 to 10 feet above the ground. They can't just put their feet down, and they are shoulder riding the interstate in the middle of drought-stricken, yellow rocks and tan dirt, windy as hell Wyoming, with semis about to be blowing by them at 80 miles per hour until they reach the next construction zone. I'm from a state with a minimum speed limit on the interstate, so seeing any slow-moving vehicle was a bit of a novelty. But seeing this, I'd never even seen an old-timey bicycle like that, let alone 2 of them with a couple of random chuckler ducks riding them on the side of the interstate like that's a good idea. I still do not understand. I was also alone in my car and had to convince myself this was not a fever dream. But I saw them in my rearview mirror, too. I've got a pretty good one for this. This was about 8 years ago. Me and a couple buddies were walking back to one of their apartments after a night out of drinking. The walk back is on this fairly long road that has a brick wall separating it from the highway a bit. As we are walking, a car is pulling out from this parking lot to our right. This guy decided to slam on the gas and peel out. As he does this, the car begins to fishtail pretty violently and crashes really hard into that brick wall, all within about 20 feet of us. All of us stand there completely stunned as to what had just happened. We walk up to the car, engine still running, and the guy driving opens the door and literally falls right out. First thing out of his mouth, "How a Judum duck it up, man." We check to see if he is alright, and my buddy turns the car off. Surveying the scene, his car is completely ducked. It was what looked like a brand new Dodge Challenger. The airbag deployed. One of the wheels was almost off the axle. The front bumper was hanging by a thread. Glass everywhere, etc. Meanwhile, another buddy of mine calls the cops while we attempt to talk to this guy. You could smell the alcohol on him, and he was extremely drunk and couldn't even put a full sentence together. He said, "Nah man, I'm good, just don't call the cops or anything, man." As we all decide talk this over, within what seemed like a split second, this guy somehow climbs back in his car, turns it on, and drives off. He is going like 10 miles per hour and there are sparks flying everywhere. We can see him turn to the right and get on this highway. I kid you not, it looked like the 4th of July as he was on the highway driving off going super slow. My buddy received a call back shortly after saying the cops found him and pulled him over. I don't think the guy was seriously injured, but we always laugh about it till this day, and it's one of those things that definitely made us say, what the duck just happened. It's a tie. One time I was driving home from work and saw this guy on the side of the road carrying a big cross behind him. It didn't look heavy or anything, probably made out of cardboard. Then I notice a wheel at the bottom of the cross. I was so tempted to yell at him, "Jesus didn't get a wheel, you cheater." I've posted this story before. I was working the closing shift as a cashier at a grocery store. It was dead quiet in there, and I was probably leaned over my register, flipping through a magazine, or just lost in thought. The front of the building is glass, so you can see in and out. I heard a soft knock coming from there. I looked and saw somebody fully costumed as the mascot of a rival grocery store, Piggly Wiggly, waving at me. It was a bit unnerving, and kinda made me question my sanity. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but I waved back a little with probably a very confused look on my face. A female friend coaxed me into going to a balloon show at a strip club here in Thailand. They shoot balloons around the club, some on willing idiots' heads, with a dart gun. And they don't use their mouths. The last gasp. I've seen it twice. Once when my wife died, and again when my grandma died. I don't know if that's a thing that happens every time, but it's the last breath a person takes on their own. It is really, 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 really ducking disconcerting. I've experienced a lot of WTF in my life, but the first time I remember being confused by a situation was when I was about 6 or so. My grandma and I were watching TV late at night in her shitty apartment in a really shitty area of Dallas when we heard screeching tires and gunshots. We peek out the window and see some guy get kicked out of a moving car, hit the ground, get up, start screaming, and then start shooting at the car. I wasn't so much confused by the gunshots. People get shot all the time. I was confused because the first gunshots came before he got unceremoniously ejected. So was there shooting inside the car? That seems unlikely, given the nature of bullets in enclosed spaces. So what was being shot at? And why was the guy kicked out afterward? And why was he shooting at the car? And how the hell did he recover so quickly after getting booted out of a moving car? So many questions and not one answer. All my grandma said was, maybe we shouldn't tell your mother about this. Apostrophe. Working in the jail, and we got a call to check a cell. The urgency of the camera operator's voice made myself and my coworker run to the location. Inmate had slices his wrist and the artery in his elbow. He must have had second thoughts though, and hit the call button. Blood all over with smears on the walls, sinks, toilet. Straight up looked like a horror movie. Guy survived thankfully and was sent to a mental hospital to hopefully get the help he needs. I've had a couple weird experiences at my dad's apartment. One day when washing dishes I swore I heard someone say my name clear as day in my right ear, as if they were right behind me. It sounded just like my boyfriend, but he was 4 hours away and there was only another female in another room. I also had blaring music playing, and there shouldn't have been any reason for me to hear over water and music. I used to sell drugs to a group of ravers about an hour north of me. On one of these excursions, the phone calls to the place were strange. The kids were answering and saying weird things at me, but confirmed they needed more stuff for their partying that night, so I continued on. I arrive at the house, and the front room is empty except for the one boyfriend who lived with 3 girls. He told me the girls are in the back, so I proceeded to the rear of the house. One of the girls came out of the bathroom and bounced over to me for a hug. She was completely naked and covered in what looked like blood and cuts, but her cheerful demeanor said she was not in pain. I asked her where the other 2 were, and she grabbed my hand and led me to the bathroom. It was like a scene from Saw. 2 of them were in the bathtub, actively slicing into each other's arms and legs with broken shaving razors. One of them was actively passing out during this. They would say something sexy and then slice each other while making sex noises. There was blood pooling on the floor, splattered on the walls, even all over the dog. I called the boyfriend in, who didn't seem surprised. Got the razors away from the girls by bribing them with weed and ketamine. Proceeded to shower them and clean them up. Once the blood was cleaned, we saw the damage. All 3 were cut nearly to the bone in some places. One girl had carved a checkerboard into her shoulder. Being 20 something, we said duck the hospital and called our EMT/coke dealer friend. He came over and, after some weird sexist rant about how women can't take care of themselves, taught us both how to stitch skin together and apply butterfly bandages. After it was all said and done, we sat them down to find out what happened. Turns out the girls had spent the week binging on LSD, barbiturates, and antipsychotics. Their thought process somehow became something like living is eternal, but bodies aren't, and they were trying to get out of their bodies so they could be eternal together. Nobody died. One girl got really sick with infection but pulled through. They are all still scarred heavily to this day. I stopped selling drugs after that. Saw 2 men in their 30s/40s walking a stuffed dog. In person and not on TV. Santa Monica, February 2011. Driving with my family during a vacation. Stopped in traffic. Happened to glance over, and there's this building with a bunch of low cement steps. Plaza thing. Sun shining through the floor to ceiling windows right through the building. IDK what it was. Anyway, halfway up these cement steps, there's a woman on an ambulance gurney. surrounded by a bunch of cops. Like 8 of them, unarmed. Also, apparently, unclothed. As I watch, she gets up on her knees, yanks her shirt off, boobs flying in the breeze, immediately gets body slammed down onto the gurney by at least 6 of the cops. That was all I caught before traffic moved. Nobody else in the car noticed. I texted my friend in North Hollywood about it and she said, "Welcome to LA." Never did find out what that was about. When my friend showed me a guy getting ducked by a horse. Live in downtown New York City. Used to seeing all kinds of weird shit and love every bit of it. One day I saw an older gentleman that looked completely average. Like he was a plumber or something of that nature and dressed like a typical working man. Until I looked at his shoes. He was wearing red women's pumps. Now, I'm used to seeing people in drag, etc. and don't even bat an eye. This guy really threw me. My brain was all like, does not compute. Illogical. Illogical. I was walking to a tram stop after a day of college classes to head home, when all of a sudden I heard this loud bang. I looked over just in time to see a young woman get hit by a car while running to catch the tram. She was hit pretty hard and ended up face down on the road. Yet as the driver gets out to ask if she's okay, she suddenly jumps up and continues running to catch the tram like nothing had happened. Thankfully she wasn't on a main road, just a pedestrian crossing off to the side. But WTF, she just got hit by a car and she's more concerned about catching her tram. If I wasn't in total shock I would have stopped her and called an ambulance, but she got on the tram before I could even register what had happened. Edit college. Cannot spell. We call it university here in Australia. Closed bracket. Not the biggest, but I was walking behind 2 guys at about 4 in the afternoon. I was on the phone with my sister and all of a sudden, the guy on the left projectile vomits, stands upright, then keeps walking with his friend who literally have no reaction to his friend's vomiting. Bizarre. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.